Let me know if you have a few more questions. Okay, on Circle. So yeah, I have one question here. See, you can query all the standard fields as usual. The way you query it, like let me just show you the query editor. Okay, that will be faster. So if you go to your query editor, and for example, if I have to search for a particular field, I go and I quickly show you that. So I say open objects. I'm going to open account, and let's say if I have to search for like got type ID, and you want class modified by, okay, there is created date, currency, ISO code. They all are standard fields. Okay, you just select all of it, put in your query, and hit the button uh, execute, and this will perform a query for you. Okay, yeah. So now when we perform a SOCL, uh, from child to parent, we can go 5 level up. So from child to parent, parent to grandparent, grandparent to great grandparent. That way we can go 5 level up. And from parent to child, we can come exactly 1 level down. As I already showed you in this particular SOCL, that whenever you fire a parent to child relationship, it will give you more than expected. As we said, limit 7, but we received more than 7 records because it's a parent to child. It's a nested query. Yeah. So in this situation, we only expect you to go 1 level from parent to child allowed, and from child to parent, there are 5 level allowed. Okay. I answered your question, Rasmi, right? Uh, I'm not recording this session actually. How to use SOCL for DML? SOCL for DML? Oh, okay. I understand what you're trying to ask. Milin, let me go next, and I'll show you that, okay? In a moment. So we can also write dynamic SOCL. Dynamic SOCL where you don't specify your string literal as a where clause. As you see here, we have a criteria. And if the boolean is true, the criteria would be status equal to working. If the boolean is false, the criteria would be closed date less than today. Today is the string date literal. Okay, and we have just added a criteria. So at runtime, we'll decide what will be the value for boolean flag, and depending on that value for a boolean flag, we will get our criteria populated, and our query will be fired on the basis of that criteria. So that's your dynamic SOCL. To run a dynamic SOCL, we use a method database.query, and we pass a dynamic SOCL as part of a string in the form of string, and it will fire that SOCL for us. Okay, so before I go further with the SOCL, let me finish the question here. So how to use? So people ask me about SOCL for loop. So I'll just quickly show you. So what are the, so before I go further, let me give you some best practices for the SOCL, which you, related to which you will get some questions, okay? So what is the transactional limit for SOCL? How many SOCL per transaction we can fire? Yes, so we can fire 100 SOCL per transaction. Now my next question is, how many records I can get in a single transaction from SOCL? How many records we can get from single transaction from SOCL in a single transaction? We can get 50,000 record maximum, okay? 50,000. Yeah, maximum 50,000. My third question to you is, what is the heap size for synchronous epochs? What is the heap size for synchronous epochs? 6 MB. Very good. So they are the 3 limits that you need to remember, and our SOCL for loop will help us to achieve it. For example, if I write this query, I would say list of account and ACCT list, and then I say select name from account. So which all account you will get from this SOCL, they will get stored in account list, right? What is heap size, side? And sorry, so heap size is a memory capacity for a single transaction. Okay, please search a bit about heap size. Heap size is memory capacity. Okay. Now, in this SOCL that you have in front of your screen is going to select all the account from your org. So if it is beyond a limit, so it will not succeed. But even if it's getting 5,000 records or 6,000 records or 8,000 records, all of that record will be present in your memory, in your heap area all the time, right? So if I'm getting 10,000 records, all of them is present in account list. If I'm going to now iterate this ACCT, account A, and I say ACCT list, in the entire process, I am talking about 10,000 records and they all are in the memory. So that can hit the 6 MB space very, very easily. So to avoid that governor limit of 6 MB heap space in your single transaction, what we are going to do, we are going to run a SOCL for loop. And how? I'll just show you. So I'm going to run a SOCL for loop like this. I'm going to change a bit of structure here. So this is my SOCL for loop. So I'll be writing my SOCL directly inside of for loop. So how that's going to help, how that's going to modify, how that's a best practice. So see it here. So when you fire this select clause, okay, so it fires exactly single query. So number of queries
Stop. All
equal
gone.
to 1. How many records I will get?
All gone.
So what happened when you fire such SOCL no? So there is a query
All gone. Here's Simba.
locator where all the records come and stay, but that's not in the memory. 10,000 records, they all are, yeah, bulkification, correct. So they all 10,000 records goes to the query locator, not in the heap area. Now, this list size is whenever we use SOCL for loop, our SOCL for loop capacity is 200 records. It means for any single iteration, it will only work for 200 records. When that 200 record is done, its calculation, manipulation, then it's going to grab another 200 from the query locator. So that size 200 is fixed. It's set by internal core architecture system. This query locator pointer is being taken care by core architecture. So we need not to do anything. We can just write this SOCL and all these limits are being taken care. So anytime, given any time in the span of this 10,000 records, your memory is only talking about 200 records because only 200 records are present in the memory. So once I process 200 records, I'm going to remove it and then I'm going to get next 200. I'm done with that, then I'm going to get next 200. So that way your loop will run. And that's how you're going to save the 6 MB heap space for your SOCL for loop. Okay. So of course you're going to run another for loop for single account that present in the list. So that's how your manipulation will be happening. Yeah, we can use the same in the trigger. Now let me give you one more fact. Your trigger is also expecting 200 records in a single go. So if you fire your trigger for 302 records, 302 records, your trigger will be fired twice. Once for 200 records and second time for another 102 records. Okay, I'll talk about it more when we go to triggers. So let me go to the SOCL now if you don't have any more question here. So SOCL help us to find. So so difference between SOCL and SOCL is similarly, I'm going to fetch a record, then I know where the record is. So it is Circle. When I don't know where the record is, it means I want to search, so it's going to be social. So Salesforce object query language, circle. Salesforce object search language, that's social. So when you don't know where the record is, you will be performing social. And social always returns you multiple objects, records from multiple objects. Okay. Yeah. So how to work with the social? To do that, let me take you to org. And if I, let's say I'm searching for Acme. So if I search Acme here, it returns me account. Okay. It returns me another object, contact. So it will return me wherever it will find Acme, because social search is possible only on a text, email, and phone field. And I'm trying to search a text. So it will go to text fields, it will go to email fields, it will go to phone fields, and wherever it will find the Acme, in which all object, all those records from those objects will be returned. That's why it is list of lists. So it will return you multiple objects. Okay, so one object account, two records from there, another object contact, around 5 to 6 records from there. So that is your kind of source. Now how we can write it in a query editor? So instead of select, you will say find curly bracket and Acme. So again, I'm going to run this, and it's going to return me 4 opportunities, 2 accounts, and 8 contacts. That's your source. Okay, so it returns you a list of lists. So this is single list which talks about 4 records opportunity, 2 records of account, and 3 and 8 records of contact. Right. So now social does have 3 section in the query. So the first section is what you are finding. So for example, I'm finding Acme. Where all I'm trying to see. So if I'm looking for a phone number, there is no point of looking into text field and name fields or email fields. Okay, then you know you need to search directly in the phone field. So you can reduce the search area by deciding in which all field it should search. So when I say find Acme, and then I will say in text field, so it will not search in phone field, it will not search in the email field. So that way you can reduce the search. So after performing a search, what all we are going to return, which all object. As you see in my query editor, it's returning me 3 objects, opportunity, account, and contact. I don't want all of it. I only want to see account. So then I can mention returning account. So by default, it will only return you ID as you see here. But if you want more field to be returned, so you can say here like this. So I'll say returning account, and I will say name, comma, ID. If I iterate, if I hit this result, so as you see, I'm getting account and ID. Okay, so if you only say a name, ID will not come. So let's say I only say name and I hit execute again. I hit execute again. Right, I hit execute again, and then, so yeah, so there is no ID field over here, only account. So account's name. So whenever you're filing such SOCL where you mention the field name, and if you think like a SOCL ID will be coming automatically, so not, that's not true. So you have to mention which all field you expect. Yeah, social can be performed on a custom object. Social limit is 20 per transaction, and 2000 maximum records can be updated with, or can be returned by social. Phone field is a different type. It's not a number. Okay, so number is a different data type, and phone is a different data type. So when you fire social in Apex, let me show you how it will work. So to see that in Apex, so if I say list of list s object, that's the return type of social. Okay. I say obj list, and then I perform my social. So social will start fine, and because it is Apex, will use single quotes. If you want to return single, or if you want to iterate single, you have to say obj list and you pass index. So you're going to talk about it, only that type of object, or one like that. Okay. Phone field equal to what data type? So there is a different data type in the Salesforce by the name phone. Okay, phone is a data type over here. Okay, so let's go to the next. Yeah, help me. Help the instructor use the developer console query editor to write a social search to retrieve the ID and name of opportunity records with Acme in the name field. So you can write this social and return it to me. Write this social and give it to me. That's how the social will be. I want opportunity or account, so you can. That's how you can define it. Social versus social. I want the count, the number of records meeting criteria. Should I use social or social? Yes, very good. Thank you. Count the number of records meeting criteria. Can we use social or social? Yes, we cannot use social here. We have to use social because social cannot do count. Social can. You want data from one object or multiple related object using joins. Multiple related objects. Should we use social or social? For second, yes. For second, we use social, not social, because it says related object. Now I'll go to third point. You don't know which object or field the data resides in. Which one you choose, social or social? I don't know where my data resides in, which object, which field. Social, very good. Now, fourth, I want to sort result. Should I use social or social? To sort, we use social. We want data from number, date, or checkbox field. Should we use social or social?
Social.
Social, because social will only provide you name, email, phone. Social will not provide you any date, any other data type. Social cannot perform join. So in Social we cannot do order by, group by. Okay, so they are the limitation of Social. Social, sorry. Working with the DML. So which DML will be using? Number one, we want to retrieve into memory a contact whose lead source is thread show. Modify the lead source to other, persist this modification to your org. We'll use insert, update, upsert, delete, or undelete. Update. Good. We'll create a new instance of a contact in memory, persist this instance to your org. Update, insert, upsert, insert. All right. Users were incorrectly entered as a contact to the UI. Retrieve those contacts into memory and use their ID values to remove them from the org. We'll use insert, update, delete, delete. Very good. Create new contacts in memory. Also modify existing contacts that were called into memory using Socal. Upsert, insert, update, delete. Very good. Upsert. Actually, the contacts removed in a scenario number 3 were created correctly. How we can use which DML command can, yeah, undelete. Very good. Now we'll see two different type of database DML statement. One is standalone DML, another one is a database DML. So standalone DML is simple insert contacts, whereas database method is coming from a database class. So database dot insert, and you pass the list of records that you want to insert or update or upsert. Now, in this situation, what is the uh, difference? What is the difference between these two? So your standalone DML can insert all or none record. So if there is any record contains error, entire transaction will fail. Whereas database.insert can perform fewer records. So it can do the partial commit. So if there is fewer record contains error and rest of the records are good. So with the database method, we can at least continue with the good data persistence, and we can only stop the wrong erroneous data. So the difference between them is that, okay, so you have to provide all or none parameter here. So for example, here I say standalone DML, whether I say insert contact or I say contacts true, it's all or none. Whereas the moment I pass false in a database.insert, it means it is partial update. So some of the values can still get inserted. So standard DML is by default all or none. It means if there is any single record contains error, the entire list insertion will be failed. But with the database insert, we have a choice. We can choose to do the partial commit. So if there is any single record which contains error, the rest of the record can still get persisted. Yes, there is a way to see which record get persisted. So there are methods here which says, I'll show you quickly those methods directly from the API. So there are methods like database dot save result. Okay. So in a save result, you have a method. You see that get is success. It will tell you which records. If it is success, then you can say get ID. So those records ID will be given who are success. If it is not success, then you can get error. So you can say get errors. So they are the two methods, is success and get errors, which will help you with that. Okay. So we'll now go with the exception handling. So can you tell me, is there any exception in this code? So what is the error here? What is the exception? Yeah, index out of bounds. There's an exception here because the size is 3 and I'm trying to fetch something from more than the size. Okay, so I pass that size plus 1. So that's going to give me definitely an error. Did the finally block execute? Yes, the finally block will always execute. So Apex governor limits is applicable to the entire transaction as you see here, not in a single trigger or single class, but the entire transaction. So there is a demo exception handling. So which code block will result an exception? A. Is there any problem in A? Is there any error in A? So there is no problem in error A because in code snippet A, because this list is blank. So when you try to insert anything, there's no insertion happening. So no error. Okay. Then the second, B. Is there any problem in B? Yes. So the last name is required field in the contact, and we are not mentioning that last name. So there is a problem. First field, last name required field. C. Is there any problem in a C? Yes, so the problem in the C is you have inserted a record and then you nullified that record. So you added that record into list and then you nullified that record. And when you try to insert, it will perform insert on null because this time your list is not blank. So it will throw you null pointer exception. D. Is there any error in D? Governor limit, yes. So the governor limit for DML is 150 and we are going to hit that limit over here in D. 4. E. Fifth one. E. So what is the error? So the last name maximum text character allowed is 80 and this is beyond 80 characters which we are passing here. So that's an error. Yeah, this is more of course. Do not count it. It is actually more than 80. All right. So it's going to throw you an error. Okay. Stay within governor limits whenever using DML operations. So what is the problem over here in this code snippet? Yeah, so we are writing DML inside a for loop. So if this select ID from contact will give me more than 150 records or 150 records, it will definitely throw me an error. So what we should do? So we should be writing so-called for loop and store the result in the list, which will give me only 200. And I'll be writing an inner loop where we modify every single contact, but the insertion or database update will happen in the outer loop. So for every 200 contacts, we are going to fire update exactly once. So bulkifying it. Good. Now there is a homework, and then we are going to start another important topic, which is trigger. Guys, you already have my email ID, right? So if I miss answering any of your question, please shoot questions on my email ID. Okay, so I would prefer taking questions over there if I can't answer your question now. Okay, but still, how many contacts you can update? Okay, so it depends on many things, Shibu. Your contact, how many update is being still valid in your transaction, heap size, okay, then your SOCL, what your SOCL is returning. So if I can fire 100 SOCL and then I have those many records. So only maximum your DML record size limit is 10,000. I cannot go beyond 10,000 DML affected records. So it depends on multiple things, how you have written the code and all that, okay? Oh, I'm still getting question into my name. Guys, girls, my name is Tripti. I'm a Salesforce instructor based out in New Delhi, India. And I conduct trainings on Salesforce development track and admin track. Yep. So you see Priyanka there because Priyanka is the organizer over here and I'm the instructor. Okay. Practice session URL. Oh, what do you mean with that? Yeah, so question was using the SOCL for loop. Yeah, so see, for example, if you have a first transaction initiated, then in that case you're finding a SOCL. That SOCL can get maximum 50,000 records for you, and then you are going to put a filter and all that, and you'll grab a relevant information or relevant records that you want to update. Then again, maximum 10,000 records can get updated in a single transaction, not beyond that. So that's going to be a little, you know, lot of factors which is going to affect that. How many memory space you have. So 10,000 record maximum for DML updation possible, but here you're retrieving 50,000 records from SOCL for loop. So there's a mismatch. So you have to put auto filter criteria. You need to provide logic over there so that you can get less number of records from a SOCL for loop, and similarly you're going to update less number of records in your update. Where can I find the max length of contact dot last name? Go to your contact object manager and contact, and look into the last name field. You will get to see that. 115 to 200 records. Oh, that's going to have a different output in a different scenario. It's not always true that 150 into 200 will be fixed, because 150 into 200 is giving you 30. Okay, so will be total. It depends on a different. If everything is correct, then yes, this number is going to work. But if your SOCL is already being fired multiple times in your entire transaction, but this number will also fail. Oh, okay. You can, if you cannot see it in Object Manager, then you can also write it in a schema. Okay, you can write describe call. Use describe call to get the max limit of a particular field. You can get that. Recording is not happening, and I'm not sure whether you can get the presentation. Yeah. You can use batch to get around governor limits, yes, because batch is something to do with asynchronous. So there the limit is altogether different. You can fire 100, 200 SOCL. So the limit is already expanded for asynchronous. So use batch, which is actually asynchronous epics, okay? If you have too many SOCL queries, the best practice says use SOCL for loop, okay, and take out your SOCL from the for loop and store it as and do it as a SOCL for loop. So that way you will be firing single SOCL, not too many SOCL. And for every single and perform your DML for 200 records in one go. So for your question, Anusri, this should be the answer. That's how you should do it. Okay. Now we'll talk about triggers, okay? So where all we can use Apex class. So Apex class can be used as a trigger handler class, can be used as a data factory class, can be used as a test class, can be used as a controller for a VF page, and also as a model. SOCL for loop is the best practice. So how to write a class? Public modifier with sharing my class. So we'll talk about first of all access modifier. We have 4 different types of modifier: global, public, protected, and private. We can use the global with our class and member of the class. So when you declare a class as a global, so you can use it inside a package and outside a package. So you can use it everywhere. All right, outside the org, inside namespace, outside the namespace, everywhere. Okay, so it make the code accessible everywhere. So you can use your web services, your email services, those classes should be declared as global. Or if you're writing your code for your app exchange, then also you should use global modifier. Public, if you declare a class or its member as a public, they are accessible within the namespace if you have a namespace. If you don't have a namespace, then it will go outside then it can is accessible inside or everywhere. So namespace is very much like a package in Java, but the scope of namespace is different. The compulsion with the namespace is different. It is not same as the org. It's like a inside a org you have multiple packages, multiple folders. Protected is not allowed to be used with the class, but you can use it with the variables, members. So the methods, the variables, uh, inner classes, they can be declared as the protected, and it is accessible in terms of inheritance. Private, ideally you should not use private with the top level class because that will throw you an error. Your inner classes can be private and your test classes can be private. Other than that, no top level class can be private. Your member variables and methods can be private, and it cannot go beyond the class of declaration. See, you should be using global for anything which you expect to go outside the namespace or you expect them to go outside the org. Okay. Now, when it comes to Lightning component controller, you can declare a public, and if your component controller and your component itself, if both of them are in the same namespace, then public will do the job. Okay, you don't require global all the time. Yeah, that's it. From the exam point of view, this particular thing is very, very important. When I say public with sharing class and public without sharing. So as we already know, I hope, that your Apex will not respect your object FLS and object cred. Okay, your permission sets and your profile, whatever you set related to object cred and FLS will not be respected throughout in Apex. But you can choose to respect the sharing model like OWD, role hierarchy, manual sharing. So you can respect to choose that. And to respect that, you can write with sharing. So the class with this keyword will respect the user's sharing model. The class with the keyword without sharing will not respect the user's sharing model. In both the example, your class will not respect object cred and object FLS. So what is the question here with this particular slide? Anybody having any question here? Yeah, I know about inherited sharing. I'll discuss about that, sure. Barak. Yeah, I will. Slide 81, please, Shibu. What was your question in the slide? I will discuss about sharing. Don't worry, guys. We'll talk about it more. All right. Yeah, all fine. Okay. Um, Sharing respect means your sharing model, like OWD, manual sharing rules, role and hierarchy, teams. So that all is sharing model. Okay. Object cred and FLS is not sharing model. Object cred and FLS is object level security. The default, if you don't write any modifier with access or without access, Rohan, it will be without sharing. That means it will run on a system mode. The default sharing is without. Okay, so let's go. Apart from with sharing and without sharing, guys, there is one more sharing known as inherited sharing. Okay, so to understand inherited sharing, we'll understand this particular table as this guide do not talk about it specifically, but I'll explain you. So there are three different type of sharing keyword: with sharing, without sharing, and inherited sharing. With sharing will respect the sharing model. Without sharing will not respect the sharing model. And default is without sharing. It means if you do not write any keyword like this in line number 1A, I don't have any keyword. Okay, so if you don't have any keyword, it will act like a without sharing. Okay, and the third type is inherited sharing. The inherited sharing is if I write inherited sharing in line number 1a. Okay, so that means if this class will be called from any other class, then this no keyword phrase class will take the sharing preferences from the caller class. Do we understand that? Okay, so let me just quickly, show you in the code terminology. Let's say I have a class A, okay, and then I have class inherited sharing B. Okay, so when I say inherited sharing, and if from class A, I'm going to call class B. So whatever is the sharing model in A declared, that will be sharing model for the B. So right now my sharing model for class A is without sharing because there is nothing defined. If there is nothing defined, it's without sharing. So B will also run it without sharing. But if I write here in A with sharing, it means this class B will also run as with sharing. So whatever the caller class declared as sharing mode, that will be the sharing mode of B because it says inherited sharing. Okay, now we'll come back to this slide here. So considering the same line number 1a, if I call this class from anonymous block, okay, this is your anonymous block. Right now, this is your enter apex code, that's your anonymous block. So your anonymous block is running in the user mode. So if you call this class from the anonymous block, it will respect the sharing model of the user because it's running in the user context. Whereas a trigger, it always run on a system context. So if I call this no keyword phrase class from the trigger, it will never respect the sharing model because trigger always run in the system context. Now this another class, it is same what I explained you over here. So if my another class from where I'm calling it, if that has with sharing, we will have with sharing. If caller class will have no sharing model, it will have no sharing model. Okay. Are we good with this slide, guys? Any question? Controller is also by default running in the system mode. You have to explicitly define with sharing or without sharing there. Okay. If B is using sharing, if B is using sharing, then it will run in a sharing mode. Yeah, that's a good question. Let's go back to that. If I don't have inherited, but I have with sharing, okay, so then B will always run in its own mode, whatever you have defined here with sharing. If you define here without, it will run in the without. Okay, the point was true only if I don't have with or without, but I have inherited. If you specifically go and say with sharing, it will run in the sharing mode. If you specifically go and say without sharing, it will not respect the sharing mode. Inherited means let my caller decide what should be my sharing mode. If B is using sharing and A is not sharing, then yeah. So yes, so all the code snippet that you will have here, they will be running. For example, this is the case in your question. It doesn't have sharing, and this is having with sharing. So B will run in with sharing, and rest all whatever you will write here, it will be running without sharing. Okay. So with sharing means it will respect the sharing model. If you go and see your data security sharing model that we develop, organization-wide default, role hierarchy. So your with sharing will respect such sharing model if you have your own. And without sharing will not respect them. That is the difference between with sharing and without sharing. If a with sharing class invoked from a trigger, it will run in the class will run in the sharing mode, and rest all the code in your trigger will run in the system mode. Sharing means sharing a record. So if I create a record, I'm the owner, and if I share that record with you, it means I'm sharing that record with you. That's a sharing model. So your Apex code will take care of the sharing mode, that if you are supposed to see 100 records out of 150, you will get to see only 100 records out of 150. That is ensuring the sharing model. So if a class with sharing keyword invoked from a trigger, the class itself will run in a sharing mode, not the trigger. If your A is with sharing and B is without sharing, then the code that you have written here, it will run in without sharing, and this will run in the sharing mode. From a trigger, if a class is called and where you use with sharing keyword, then the code that is being called from a class, it will be run in the sharing mode. It will respect the sharing model, and rest all piece in the trigger, rest all piece of code in the trigger will be running in the system mode. Field permissions are not part of the sharing model. Field permission is a part of the object permission, not the record permission. Any more questions here, guys? Explain the inner classes. Okay, Naveen. So inner classes are a class inside another class. Okay. In case of inner classes, the sharing model is not being shared. So inner class will have its own sharing model. Outer class will have its own sharing model. Okay. And they both will run in its own context. So if your outer class is with sharing and inner class is without sharing, so inner class piece will be called and it will run without sharing. Okay, so there is no inheritance between outer and inner class. They both will have their own different type of sharing model defined. Okay, Naveen? Apex triggers. I hope you know already what is Apex trigger, guys. Yeah, one second. I'm sorry. Thank you. So now I'll go to the trigger. Do you know what is trigger, right? Okay, Gaurav, I have one more question on that. Okay, okay. Which sharing class called from trigger will but would it run in a system context? So the class will run in the user context, but trigger will run in the system context. And that is the only way to respect sharing model from the trigger. Call a class with sharing. Okay, Gaurav? Can be used with sharing class when a field has to show on a VF page for different users. Yeah, you can do that. You can use describe schema call, Samir, and you can find out whether that field is accessible or not using the describe schema call and show that on a VF page, depending on whether it's supposed to go there or not. User interface means user sharing context. System level means everything is available. There's no restriction. That's a system level. Uh, if you define a class without sharing and you invoke it via execute anonymous, that class will run in the user mode because execute anonymous window executes in the user context. So it will respect the sharing model of the user who is running execute anonymous window. So yes, it will be taken into account, version. Okay, Vishwanathan, your question is if the class A is with sharing and you call the method B from class B, and B is without sharing. So class A is with sharing and B is without sharing, of course. So in that case, both the classes has already declared in which context they will run. So it will be respect. So your B will run without sharing mode here. So user mode is when user's sharing model is taken in the account. System mode is everything is open. There's no restriction. So you can see all records there. System mode and without sharing, no difference. They are same. System mode is equivalent to without sharing. Like it's just a two different, you know, names. So user context and system context. User context will be running on the user mode, and whoever is the user, his or her sharing model will be taken into account. Whereas in a system context, that's not possible. It will always run in the non-restricted environment. So everything will be shown to you. Can I use a workflow when I have when I have to update a field for a set of users? For a set of users, is this conditional? Samir, is this update conditional? Oh, you can do it with the workflow. Yeah, not a problem. Just see that condition is static. If the condition is also data driven, then it's not possible. If the condition is static, for example, location equal to California, it's static condition. You can write that. But if you say if the whatever the condition, if it is California, share it with California team. If it is San Francisco, then share it with the San Francisco team. In that case, it's data driven. Then it has to be done by Apex. Okay, Samir. Yes, Iqbal. See, your records opening is happening from Apex only, and if your Apex is running in with sharing, it will open all the. So if it is running without sharing, it will show all the records to the component. Okay.